Hi, and thanks for tuning into this video in which I'll be outlining some tips and tricks for the Boss GT1000. So I've had my GT1000 for around 5 years, and in that time I've found a few useful tips and tricks which I'll be sharing with you in this video. Now, a lot of the GT1000 tips and tricks videos that I've seen on YouTube tend to focus on things like how to set the input level for different guitars, and that's great because you really do need to do that. But in this video I'll be focusing on tips which I haven't really seen mentioned very much elsewhere. Okay, so here we go, let's open up Boss Tone Studio. Tip number 1. If an effect is in the signal chain, even when it's switched off, it can still affect the tone. And this is particularly noticeable on the wah and EQ blocks, especially on overdriven patches. For example, on this patch I've set the wah effect to use the fat wah, and when it's engaged it has quite a pronounced mid-range. And here's how this patch sounds with the wah switched off. Now if I change the wah effect to use the cry wah, which is like a standard crybaby, and leave it switched off, the sound has less mid-range. And the same applies to EQ blocks. So for example, this EQ block has the default mid-range settings of 500 Hz and 4 kHz. And here's how this patch sounds. And if I now change those low and high mid-range settings to, let's say, 20 Hz and 16 kHz, you'll now hear quite a difference, and there'll be noticeably less mid-range. Okay, so tip number 1 is to be mindful that some effects, especially the wah and EQ blocks, can have quite an effect on the sound even when they're switched off. Tip number 2, the resonance control in the amp block. Most of the presets in the GT1000 have the resonance parameter set to 0. And when you're playing the GT1000 through studio monitors, having the resonance around 0 is usually okay because you don't want the guitar to sound too thick so it sits well in a mix. But if you're playing live at volume through a PA, presets you have set up at home through studio monitors or headphones can often end up sounding a bit thin, and this is where the resonance control can really help to thicken up the low mid-range. So here's an overdriven patch and the resonance is currently set to 0, and here's how it sounds. And if I now increase the resonance control, you can hear it's noticeably thicker in the lower mid-range, and to be honest that's probably a bit too much for recording because it won't sit that well in a mix. But in a live situation, that extra low mid-range can really help to thicken the sound out, especially if you're playing direct through the front of house. Tip number 3, if you use an effect with the same parameters on more than one patch, I highly recommend you try using the Stompbox feature. So for example, here are 2 different clean patches, and let's say I want to use a plate reverb with the same parameters on both. Well, we can save that plate reverb with those parameters to a Stompbox. Here's the reverb effect on the first clean patch, and if I now come over to where it says Stompbox, right to Stompbox, and let's put it into Stompbox number 10 and just call it plate. And it's now saved that plate reverb with those parameters to the Stompbox number 10 called plate. So if I just save that patch, if I now go into my other clean patch, I can now select that same Stompbox, and it will automatically bring in the same settings. And if I now save that, and one of the great things about using a Stompbox is if I now adjust any of those reverb parameters on either of those 2 clean patches, it will automatically update the same parameters on the other patch in real time, and you don't even have to hit the right button. So for example, let's change the effect level from 63, or sorry, from 60 down to 40 on this natural clean patch, and I won't hit save or anything like that at all. I'll just flick straight over to the boutique clean patch, and you'll see that the effect level has automatically dropped from 60 down to 40. And I find this is really useful when playing live. So let's say I have 5 patches which all use the same reverb settings. When I get to a gig, I find it's a really bright room and the reverb effect level on my 5 patches is a bit too much. So I can just adjust the reverb level on one patch and the other 4 will automatically be adjusted. And I often use the same reverb and delay settings on multiple patches. So I've set up a reverb Stompbox, as you just saw, and a delay Stompbox to allow me to easily control reverb level and delay level across multiple patches simultaneously. Tip number 4, place an EQ block just after the amp section. So when I use the GT1000 live direct to a PA or front of house, I always have an EQ block as a parametric EQ somewhere after the amp block on all patches, and the main parameter I use is the high cut. And I use this because most guitar speakers have a fairly steep frequency cutoff around 5 kHz, whereas most PA speakers can handle up to 20 kHz and sometimes beyond. So when going direct to PA, I usually set the high cut in the EQ block somewhere between 4 and 6.3 kHz, and this removes any high-end fizz, particularly on overdriven patches. But if I'm using that same patch through studio monitors or perhaps headphones, I tend to find that I don't really need that same level of high cut. So I'll either increase the value of the high cut or I'll turn that EQ block off. Now I often find that my clean patches need a different high cut value to the overdriven patches, so I've set up 2 EQ Stompboxes, one for clean and one for overdriven. And when I get to gigs, I only really need to adjust the parameters in that EQ block on one clean patch and one overdriven patch, and all the other clean and overdriven patches which use those EQ Stompboxes will automatically be changed in real time. And this is a really great feature because it means that at a gig you can just edit the EQ on 2 patches and all the other patches will be changed automatically. Tip number 5. So the 6 rotary knobs on the GT1000 can be set to control more or less any parameter of any effect, and by default they are set to control the gain and EQ of the amp block. But I change 5 of them to control the parameters that I use most often, especially when playing live. I have knob number 6 set to change the reverb level, numbers 4 and 5 to adjust the delay 1 and 2 level, and the reason I've got 2 delay levels there is because I always use the dual delay effect, which has a level control for each of the 2 delays. Knob 3 I set to control the high cut on the EQ1 block, and knob 2 I set to control the low cut on the EQ1 block. And because I tend to use Stompboxes for the EQ1, the master delay and the reverb effects, the knobs I've assigned to those effects will change the relevant parameters on all patches that use those Stompboxes simultaneously. So for example, if I have 5 patches which all use the same EQ1 Stompbox, and I'm using any one of those 5 patches, and I turn knob 3 to adjust the high cut from say 5 kHz up to 6.3 kHz, it will change that parameter on all 5 patches simultaneously, and the same principle applies to the knobs of assigned to the delay level and reverb level. So when I get to a gig, I can more or less tailor my patches to match the room with just those 5 knobs, and I don't even have to hit the right button. So thanks for watching this video. I really hope you found some of these tips and tricks useful, and if you have, I'd really appreciate it if you'd like and subscribe to my channel. Thanks again for watching. See you next time.